Marcus Thompson had been silent for 28 years, not because he couldn't speak, but because every time he tried, the words got stuck, trapped in his throat like birds beating against a closed window. The stutter was so severe that by age 12, Marcus had simply stopped trying. In school, he'd point. At work, he'd email. In social situations, he'd nod or shake his head. His family had become his voice, finishing his sentences, answering questions directed at him, speaking for him so often that most people forgot Marcus even had a voice of his own. On September 12, 2019, Marcus Thompson's mother Sharon signed her family up for Family Feud. Marcus, his parents, his sister Ashley, and his brother David. When the application asked about unique family characteristics, Sharon wrote, "Our son Marcus has a severe stutter. He hasn't spoken in public in over 15 years. But we love Family Feud, and we want to show him he belongs on that stage just like everyone else." The producers accepted the application with one condition. All family members must be able to answer questions. Sharon promised they'd make it work. What she didn't tell them was that she had no idea how. What happened on that Family Feud stage wasn't just television. It was the moment a man who'd been silent for most of his life discovered that someone was finally willing to wait for him to speak, and that someone was Steve Harvey, who would do something no game show host had ever done: stop the entire production, stand in complete silence for over 2 minutes, and refuse to move forward until Marcus Thompson said what he needed to say. The silence that started in second grade. Marcus Thompson's stutter began when he was 7 years old. Nobody knows why stuttering starts. Genetics, neurological development, childhood trauma, anxiety. Doctors have theories, but few answers. For Marcus, it appeared suddenly, like a switch had flipped in his brain. One day he was reading aloud in second grade, and the word butterfly got stuck. B. He couldn't get past that first syllable. His classmates giggled. His teacher, Mrs. Henderson, tried to be patient but eventually moved on to the next student. Marcus felt his face burn with shame. From that day forward, speaking became a minefield. Some words came out fine. Others locked up completely. There was no pattern, no way to predict which words would betray him. The harder he tried to speak smoothly, the worse it got. The anxiety of anticipating the stutter made the stutter worse, which increased the anxiety, which made the stutter worse, a vicious cycle with no exit. By middle school, Marcus had developed avoidance strategies. He'd rearrange sentences to avoid problem words. He'd stay quiet in class. He'd take longer routes to avoid talking to people in hallways. His world got smaller and smaller, constricted by the fear of those stuck words. High school was worse. Teenagers are cruel. The mocking wasn't constant, but it was frequent enough. "Spit it out, Marcus. We don't have all day. Why don't you just stop talking?" So he did. By sophomore year, Marcus rarely spoke at school at all. His family became his translators. His mother Sharon would accompany him to doctor's appointments and speak for him. His sister Ashley would order for him at restaurants. His father Tom would handle phone calls. They meant well. They were protecting him from the embarrassment and frustration. But they were also unintentionally reinforcing the idea that Marcus couldn't speak for himself. Speech therapy helped marginally. Marcus learned techniques: controlled breathing, gentle onset, prolonged speech. But techniques only work if you're willing to speak. And by age 16, Marcus had decided that silence was safer than the struggle. He graduated high school quietly, got a job in data entry at an insurance company where he could work mostly alone, communicating through email, lived at home with his parents, had no romantic relationships. How do you date when you can't speak? His social circle consisted entirely of his family. Sharon watched her son disappear into himself. The funny, energetic boy he'd been at 6 was gone, replaced by a silent young man who seemed to be shrinking away from the world. She tried everything: more therapy, support groups, medication for anxiety. Nothing brought back Marcus's voice. Then one evening in 2019, the Thompson family was watching Family Feud together. It was their routine: dinner at 6:30, Family Feud at 7. Marcus loved the show. He'd sign his answers to his family, getting excited when he was right, laughing at Steve Harvey's reactions. In those moments, watching from the safety of his couch, Marcus was animated and expressive. Sharon had an idea, a crazy idea. What if the thing that could bring Marcus out of his shell was the very thing he loved? What if being on that stage in that environment could somehow break through the wall of silence he'd built? "We should apply," she said during a commercial break. Marcus's eyes went wide. He shook his head violently. "I'm serious," Sharon continued. "You love this show. You know all the answers. Why shouldn't you be up there?" Marcus grabbed his phone and typed, "Because I can't talk." You can talk, Sharon said gently. You choose not to because it's hard. But maybe if you were up there with Steve Harvey, with all those people believing in you, maybe you'd try. Marcus stared at his mother. Then slowly he typed, "What if I freeze? What if I can't say anything? Then we'll say it for you. Like we always do, but Marcus, you're 28 years old, you can't let this stutter take your whole life. We're applying, and you're coming with us." The application that almost didn't happen, Sharon filled out the Family Feud application honestly. She explained Marcus's stutter, his silence, his avoidance. She explained that he'd likely need his family to speak for him most of the time. She wrote, "But he deserves to be there. He deserves to stand on that stage and know he belongs." 3 months later, they got the call. The Thompson family had been selected. Taping date September 12, 2019. Marcus panicked. For 2 weeks before the taping, he barely slept. The thought of standing on that stage under those lights, with cameras pointed at him and hundreds of people watching, made his chest tight. What if they asked him a question directly? What if he had to speak? What if he froze and humiliated himself and his family on national television? His family tried to reassure him. "We'll handle the talking," David promised. "You just stand there and look pretty," Ashley joked. But Sharon pulled Marcus aside privately. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "If Steve Harvey asks you a question directly, I want you to try. Not for us. Not for the show. For yourself. Just try. Even if the words don't come out. Even if it takes a long time. Just try." Marcus typed on his phone. "Why? Why does it matter?" "Because you matter," Sharon said simply. "And what you have to say matters, and I think you've forgotten that." The day everything changed. September 12, 2019. The Thompson family stood backstage at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. Marcus's hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat, which only made the fear worse. What if his stutter was worse when his heart was racing? The family was called to the stage. The lights were blinding. The audience was enormous. Steve Harvey stood at his podium in his perfect suit, that famous smile on his face, completely at ease in a way Marcus couldn't imagine. "The Thompson family, from Portland, Oregon," Steve announced with his signature energy. He went down the line. Tom Thompson, patriarch; Sharon Thompson, mother of the family; David Thompson; Ashley Thompson; and Marcus Thompson. Steve paused at Marcus, sensing something. Maybe it was the way Marcus stood slightly behind his brother. Maybe it was the way he didn't make eye contact. Maybe Steve, with decades of reading people, just knew. "Marcus, how you doing, man?" Steve asked warmly. Marcus nodded, managed a small smile. "You ready to play Family Feud?" Marcus nodded again. Steve's eyebrows raised slightly, but he moved on. The game began. The first round was standard. The opposing family, the Rodriguez family from Texas, was energetic and loud. Good answers. Lots of celebration. The Thompsons were more reserved but competitive. Tom gave a strong answer. Sharon was quick on the buzzer. David and Ashley played well. Marcus stood at the end of the podium, the fifth position. With each question, Steve worked down the line. When he reached Ashley, who was fourth, Marcus tensed. But Steve would move back to the beginning before coming to Marcus. It was like being in school again, watching the teacher move through the classroom, praying she wouldn't call on you. Second round. Same pattern. The family carried Marcus. He didn't have to speak. He was just there. But in the third round, something happened. The question: name something you avoid doing because it's difficult. Steve started with Tom. Public speaking. Good answer, number 4 on the board. To Sharon, exercising. Number 3. To David, math. Not on the board, 1 strike. To Ashley, asking for help. Number 5. 1 strike. The Rodriguez family was waiting to steal. Steve had to go to Marcus. Steve walked over to Marcus at the end of the podium. He looked at him with those perceptive eyes that had seen thousands of contestants, but somehow made each one feel like the only person in the room. "Marcus," Steve said, "name something you avoid doing because it's difficult." The moment hung in the air. The studio was loud with ambient noise, audience murmuring, lights humming, cameras whirring, but for Marcus it all faded to silence. There was just Steve Harvey waiting for an answer, waiting for Marcus to speak. Marcus's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His family started to shift, ready to answer for him like they always did. But Steve held up his hand. "Hold on," he said quietly. Then louder to the production booth, "Stop the clock." The game timer stopped. The studio quieted slightly. Steve took a step closer to Marcus. "Marcus, I'm going to ask you again, and I want you to take your time. There's no rush. Name something you avoid doing because it's difficult." Marcus tried again. His mouth formed the shape of a word, but it stuck. "Tu-tu-tu." He couldn't get past it. Frustration and shame flooded through him. His sister moved to help. "Ashley, I need you to step back," Steve said, not unkindly. Then to the whole family. "Everyone, I need you to let Marcus answer this one." Sharon started to protest. "Steve, he has a stutter, he can't." "Can't or doesn't," Steve interrupted gently. He looked at Marcus. "Do you have an answer in your head?" Marcus nodded. "Can you say it if someone gives you enough time and doesn't rush you?" Marcus stared at Steve. Nobody had ever asked him that before. Nobody had ever offered to wait. Slowly, Marcus nodded. "Then I'm going to stand right here," Steve said. "And I'm going to wait as long as it takes. Because what you have to say matters, Marcus. It matters." The 2 minutes that changed everything. The studio fell completely silent. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how Family Feud worked. The game had rhythm, energy, pace. Dead air was anathema to television. But Steve Harvey, one of the most successful hosts in television history, stood completely still and waited. 10 seconds passed. Marcus's mouth moved, trying to form words. 20 seconds. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The Rodriguez family looked confused. The Thompsons were torn between wanting to help their son and respecting Steve's request. 30 seconds. In the production booth, producers were panicking. "We can't air this. We need to cut. This is dead air." But nobody said anything to Steve. Something about the way he stood there, completely patient, completely present, stopped them. 45 seconds. Marcus was crying now, tears of frustration running down his face. But he didn't look away from Steve, and Steve didn't look away from him. "Take your time," Steve said softly. "We've got all day." 1 minute. Marcus tried a different approach. He took a breath, like his speech therapist had taught him years ago. Talking, he managed to get out. "Talking," Steve repeated gently. "You're doing it, Marcus. You're talking right now. Keep going." 1 minute 15 seconds. Talking. Tito, PP. Marcus's face was strained with effort. "People," Steve offered. Marcus shook his head. He wanted to say it himself. 1 minute 30 seconds. The studio was so quiet you could hear people breathing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was raw human struggle, broadcast in real time. People," Marcus finally got out. "Talking to people," Steve said. "Is that your answer? Something you avoid because it's difficult is talking to people?" Marcus nodded, exhausted. Steve turned to the board. "Show me, talking to people." Not on the board. 2 strikes, family out. The Rodriguez family won the round. But nobody in that studio cared about the points. Steve walked back to Marcus. "Do you know what you just did?" Marcus looked at him, confused, still shaking from the effort. "You just spoke on national television," Steve said. "In front of 300 people in this studio, and millions more watching at home. You stuttered. It took time. It was hard, and you did it anyway. Do you understand how brave that was?" Marcus's mother was crying. His father had his hand over his mouth. Ashley and David were both wiping their eyes. Steve continued. And now there were tears in his eyes too. "Marcus, I've hosted this show for years. I've seen thousands of people come through here, and what you just did. That took more courage than anything I've ever seen on this stage." The studio audience stood up, spontaneous. Nobody prompted them. They just stood and applauded, and kept applauding, for Marcus, for his struggle, for his courage, for those 2 words, talking to people. But the most extraordinary thing, Marcus smiled. A real, genuine smile. Because for the first time in his life, someone had waited for him. Someone had believed that what he had to say was worth the time it took to say it. What happened next changed more than one life. The game continued, but it was different now. Marcus didn't speak again that episode. The effort of those 2 words had exhausted him. But he stood taller. He made eye contact. When his family won their round, he celebrated with them instead of hanging back. After the camera stopped rolling, Steve did something unprecedented. He asked the Thompson family to stay. He sat down with them right there on the stage, and he talked to Marcus. "How long have you been silent?" Steve asked. Marcus typed on his phone, "Since I was 16, 12 years. "Why?" Another type. "Because it's easier than fighting to get words out. Because people don't wait. Because I got tired of seeing pity and frustration in people's faces." Steve read it and nodded slowly. "Marcus, I'm going to tell you something. I've built my whole career on words. Comedy, hosting, communication, that's what I do. And you know what I learned today from you?" Marcus looked at him. "That words aren't just about speed. They're about meaning. And sometimes the most important words are the ones that take the longest to say. You taught me patience today. You taught everyone in this studio patience. And you showed people watching at home who have the same struggle that you do that they're not alone." Steve then did something that Marcus would never forget. He gave Marcus his personal phone number. "I want you to text me," Steve said. "Once a week, doesn't have to be long. Just tell me how you're doing. Tell me if you're trying to speak. Tell me when it goes well and when it doesn't, because I'm invested now. I want to know how your story continues." The episode aired 4 months later as a special 1-hour Family Feud titled When Courage Speaks. The producers kept the full 2 minutes of silence intact. They didn't edit it down. They didn't cut away. They let viewers sit in that uncomfortable, powerful silence with Marcus. The response was overwhelming. The National Stuttering Association received 15,000 calls in the week after the episode aired. People who stuttered, calling to say, "I saw myself in Marcus. I felt seen." Parents of children who stutter, calling to say, "You gave me hope for my child." But more than that, the episode started a conversation about patience, about listening, about giving people time to say what they need to say instead of rushing them or finishing their sentences. Schools across the country showed the episode in assemblies, using Marcus's moment as a teaching tool. This is what it looks like to wait for someone. This is what it looks like to believe someone has something worth saying. Marcus Thompson today. Marcus Thompson is now 32 years old. He still stutters, that hasn't changed, and likely never will. Stuttering isn't something you cure. It's something you manage, live with, work through. But Marcus speaks now. He started small. After the Family Feud episode, he began speech therapy again, but with a different mindset. He wasn't trying to stop stuttering. He was trying to accept that he'd stutter and speak anyway. He started ordering his own food at restaurants. It took time. Servers had to wait while he worked through coffee. Some were patient, some weren't. Marcus learned to accept both. He started answering his own phone. His father Tom almost cried the first time Marcus called him instead of texting. 6 months after the episode aired, Marcus went on a date. Her name was Emily. She was a speech therapist, which Marcus found both ironic and perfect. On their first date, Marcus warned her, "I stutter. It's going to take me a while to say things." Emily smiled. "I have time. I'm not going anywhere." They got married 2 years later. At the wedding, Marcus gave a speech. It took 15 minutes to deliver what should have been a 5-minute speech. Every single person in that room waited, patient and present, while Marcus told his new wife how much he loved her. Steve Harvey was there, sitting in the front row, crying like a baby. Today, Marcus works as an advocate for people who stutter. He goes to schools and talks to kids. Slowly, with pauses, with repetitions, but he talks. He tells them, "Your words matter, even if they take time, even if they come out wrong, even if you have to try 5 times, your words matter." He volunteers with the National Stuttering Association, mentoring teenagers who are where he was at 16, silent, scared, shrinking from the world. He tells them about Family Feud, about Steve Harvey, about the 2 minutes that changed his life. "Someone waited for me," Marcus tells them, "and that changed everything. Now I wait for you. And I believe that what you have to say is worth waiting for." Marcus still texts Steve Harvey every week. Steve responds every time. Sometimes it's encouragement. "Proud of you, Marcus." Sometimes it's a joke. Sometimes it's a question about how things are going. On the anniversary of Marcus's Family Feud appearance, Steve always calls. They talk. Marcus speaks, slowly but surely, and Steve waits. They become unlikely friends, connected by 2 minutes of silence that became a moment of courage. Why? This story matters. Marcus Thompson's story matters because 3 million Americans stutter. Most of them, like Marcus, have experienced the shame, the frustration, the social isolation that comes with fighting for every word. But more than that, Marcus's story is about patience. In a world that moves faster every day, that celebrates quick responses and rapid-fire communication, that has no tolerance for dead air or awkward pauses, Marcus reminds us that some things are worth waiting for. Steve Harvey learned that lesson on September 12, 2019. He learned that television doesn't always have to move at television speed, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just stand there and wait for someone to find their voice. The 2 minutes of silence that aired on Family Feud wasn't dead air. It was the most alive moment in the show's history. It was the sound of struggle and courage and patience and belief. It was the sound of a man who'd been silent for 12 years deciding that what he had to say was worth fighting for. And it was the sound of a host, a production crew, and an audience deciding that Marcus Thompson was worth waiting for. Steve Harvey says that Marcus changed how he hosts. "I used to think my job was to keep the energy up, keep things moving, keep people entertained. But Marcus taught me that sometimes my job is to stop, to wait, to show someone that they matter more than the clock, more than the production schedule, more than the fear of dead air." Family Feud now has a policy. If a contestant needs extra time to answer, they get it. No rush, no pressure. Patience first. They call it the Marcus Protocol. Several contestants with speech impediments, processing disorders, and anxiety have benefited from it since. Marcus Thompson didn't win the $20,000 that day. His family lost their match, but what he won was infinitely more valuable. He won back his voice. Not a perfect voice, not a fluent voice, but his voice. And he learned that his voice, stutters and all, was worth hearing. Every time Marcus struggles to get a word out now, he remembers Steve Harvey standing on that stage, arms crossed, completely still, completely patient, completely present, and he remembers Steve's words, "What you have to say matters." So Marcus keeps speaking, slowly, with pauses, with repetitions, with courage, because his words do matter. And now the world knows it. The recording of those 2 minutes, Marcus struggling to say talking to people while Steve Harvey waited, has been viewed over 50 million times on YouTube. It's used in speech therapy clinics to teach children that struggling is okay. It's shown in schools to teach patience. It's shared by stutterers who want to say this is what it's like to people who don't understand. 2 minutes. 2 words, 1 life changed, and millions of people reminded that the most important things we say are often the hardest to get out. And that's okay, because someone will wait, someone will listen, someone will believe that what you have to say is worth the time it takes to say it. Just like Steve Harvey waited for Marcus Thompson on that September day when courage finally found its voice.